Hi, this is Scott Wilkinson, host of Home Theater Geeks. In episode 62, I talk with Rob Sabin, Home Theater Magazine's new editor, about all things audio-video. So stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust. This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Home Theater Geeks is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson, recorded April 18th, 2011, episode 62, Home Theater's new editor. This episode of Home Theater Geeks is brought to you by Netflix. Watch thousands of TV episodes and movies streamed to your PC, Mac, or TV instantly. Plus, get DVDs by mail in about one business day. For your free 30-day trial, go to netflix.com/twit. Hi there, Scott Wilkinson here with UltimateAVMag.com and HomeTheater.com. This week's guest geek is Rob Sabin, the new editor of Home Theater Magazine and a new colleague of mine. Hey, Rob, welcome to the show.
How you doing, Scott?
Doing great. Thanks so much for being here. And we got a lot to talk about in your new position as the editor of Home Theater Magazine and the website. Before we get to that, I want to make sure that those who are tuned into the live video stream at live.twit.tv or logged into the chat room at irc.twit.tv can post questions for Rob, and I'll pass on as many as I can. So, Rob, if I'm not mistaken, you live at the Jersey Shore, right?
Yeah, I'm in Jersey.
Seen Snooki lately?
No, actually, you know, we're all very embarrassed about that whole show.
Why is that?
Oh, you know, well, they actually kind of imported all those folks from Staten Island for the most part, so they're really not even fully reflective of the Jersey Shore scene anyway. But
oh man.
No, it's actually the Jersey Shore is a wonderful place to live and just a fantastic area. So we like to promote it as much as we can in a good way.
And I guess that show has brought it into national attention anyway, huh?
Yeah, at the very least, you know, it's. I guess that's one step up from having Jersey be known as the place next to Newark Airport. You know that pollutes the air. Elizabeth, New Jersey is known for that. But
right. Well, I'd love to share with our listeners a little bit of your background, how you became interested in AV. How did that all start? Were you like most of us, being a very young guy and kind of going, "Oh, I like this stuff"?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, I think as you know, most of our colleagues out in the consumer electronics press are people who started with this as a hobby and somehow or another managed to turn it into a real career. And I'm no different from that. I started out when I was in my early teens. I was actually building various types of Heath kits and wiring up circuits. And probably as I reached my mid-teens, I'll never forget my parents had a console in the living room that had a stereo system built right into it. That was the day when you had a hi-fi. It was a piece of furniture,
right?
They decided they were going to turn that cabinet into a dresser for my sister and pulled out of it a Harman Kardon A300 series tube amplifier.
Wow.
An integrated amp, which I actually still own today. It's storage right now. It needs some restoration, so if anybody knows anyone. But that amp was amazing. It was this tiny little tube amplifier. I think it produced maybe all of 12 or 13 watts a channel. But I got a couple of speakers for it, and I'll still never forget just how big and luscious and rich that image was. It just really, really sounded great. And I was hooked. That was it, and it all went from there. So, I ended up studying electronics a little bit in school. I have a 2-year technical degree in electronics, and then kind of segued out of that and got into journalism. And it's been that way for the last 25 years or so.
Yeah, you and I have known each other a very long time. We've been on many trips together and seen each other at CES all the time and other trade shows. So I'm sure glad to have you on board with my company and our group now. But before you got here, what other, I know you've been to some other publications. Give us a little bit of that.
Oh, sure. Well, the history kind of when I started out, when I finally got my first opportunity to work in the consumer electronics press, I had a good friend who was working at a graphic arts agency that was at the time setting type for one of the high-end audio magazines that's really still around today, The Absolute Sound. They were based out on Long Island, where I was living at the time, and I ended up, they knew that I was interested in hi-fi. I was one of those audiophiles at the time who could pretty much tell you the specifications on every Pioneer receiver, but really didn't know much about high-end audio. And that ended up being, I ended up getting a job there as an editorial assistant, and it was my first exposure to high-end audio. Great place to develop a good ear. And from there, I went on to a number of other publications. I worked in the electronics trades for a while, which I thought was a very interesting and good experience to learn how the business side of the electronics business works. But eventually ended up at Stereo Review, at Home Theater Magazine for a little while, maybe about 10 or 12 years ago. So if there's any old readers, you might actually remember me, or at least the byline from those days.
Kind of comes full circle, doesn't it?
Exactly. And then most recently, from the editorial world, I was the executive editor at Sound and Vision magazine. Up until about 3 years ago, I was running the test program there. And then since then, I've been running my own custom install business, which has been yet another, I think, very positive experience and something that I bring now to the new job. So.
Yeah, I find that fascinating also, and I think very valuable, because you've got experience in the trenches, as it were, you know, actually out there. If I'm not mistaken, you were actually putting panels on walls and running cables through walls and so on. So you've got a little bit different perspective than certainly I do. I've never actually worked as an installer. So you must have some interesting tales to tell from that experience.
Yeah, it really is. And, you know, the thing was, and when I started the business, of course, the economy had just really taken a downturn. And, you know, well, why not, you know?
Oh, man.
You can only get better, right, if you're starting from zero. So,
yeah, I guess that's true.
So that's kind of the way I looked at it. But, you know, when I basically went after every job that I could, and because of a lot of the connections that I had in the industry prior to that from my editorial days, I ended up getting work over a very wide swath of area, and consequently, with a lot of different types of customers. I worked with, you know, essentially entry-level customers who really just didn't need much more than a panel and maybe a sound bar, all the way up to people who were putting in fairly high-end home theaters. And when you do get that kind of broad experience, you really get a chance to see how people just live with these things and how they integrate electronics into their lives. And that's what I think is so nice about that experience to bring out of the home theater job, because, you know, we tend to sit in our little ivory towers. We go to our press events. We hear some amazing demos, needless to say, when we go out to the shows. And yeah, and that's one of the great things about the job, is just being around and exposed to the equipment all the time. But to go into someone's home and to see them using a multi-room audio system, or to hear them tell you about their experience with their family, with the home theater that you help create for them, is both very gratifying and also very interesting to see how they work with things. I think one of the, and I know we're going to talk a little bit today, I hope, about some of the issues and things that are facing the industry, but I think one of the fascinating things I think that I gained from that experience is just how really critical that control aspect is, that ability to operate all of this equipment, how complex, unbelievably complex all this gear is, and we take it for granted. We spend all our time with it, so it most of the time doesn't faze us to pick up the remote control of an AV receiver. But the average person really can't handle it, and you really gain an appreciation for what it means to make something simple for someone to use, and that, I think, is a great theme to take into the pages of home theater as we go forward.
Exactly. Certainly things have gotten a lot more complex as the years have gone on. It used to be, you know, you had one remote. You had your TV remote, and then you added your receiver and maybe an external sound system to the TV. Okay, that's two remotes. Then you had a VHS player, or then a DVD player, now a Blu-ray player. You got a remote for that. Pretty soon you got all these remotes on your coffee table And really what you want to end up doing is hopefully programming a universal remote. I assume you did that for some of your clients as well.
Oh, I almost insisted on, with virtually every client, to do it. And in fact, you know, the minimum you can probably spend at the end of the day on a decent universal remote for a system is probably, you know, between $350 and $500 when you get done with programming up what has to be done. And I can remember many conversations with clients who basically said, do I really have to spend this? And my response to that would be, I would much rather that we strip down every other aspect of the system and make sure that you have a fantastic push-button, one-touch remote control where you know you can hit a button that says watch movie and everything happens. And my thinking was not only that that's real, that to me is their experience, and that's also my referral too in the industry, because when somebody comes to their home and they show them that system and they say, look what I can do, and they hit that button on that touchscreen remote and everything lights up and does exactly what it's supposed to do, it turned out to be the best referral that I could get. So
right, exactly. Reverb Mike in the chat room says $30 at Walmart. Now, certainly you can get universal remotes for $30.
Absolutely.
But are they really going to do the job?
Well, here's the deal, and this is the thing about remote controls. You really have to get a remote that will do macros. And for those who aren't familiar with that term, a macro is a sequence of commands that allows you to hit one button and make your television switch to the right input, make your AV receiver switch to the right input, perhaps turn on the play function for your DVD player, and have everything operate perfectly operational, and then of course have a volume rocker and or a channel rocker if you're watching TV that properly corresponds to whatever component you're working with. And the trick there is that a $30 remote will allow you, if you're very good at kind of keeping track of what mode it's in at any given time, to control all your different components. But to hit one button in what we would call an activity-based remote and have it go to watch movie, listen to music, listen to multi-room audio, whatever it is that you need to do, that's the beauty of that. And you know, the least expensive remotes that will do that are maybe about $100. You know, a Harmony remote control, and we're all very fond of those remotes.
Have you used the Harmony? Have you specified that into clients' homes before?
Yeah, I have, and the reason for that is that it really depends on the client, because you can go up from there. You know, probably the most popular remotes that are being used these days are in the custom install world are universal remote control, URC. And they are very powerful and very good remotes. There's also Harmony, which gets used, and there's also RTI. And then, of course, you go up from there into some of the more sophisticated control systems with touch panels and handhelds such as Crestron and AMX, and Control 4, of course.
Right.
But the Harmony remotes are particularly cost-effective. And in particular, when you're dealing with entry-level clients for whom the concept of a $500 remote or a $300 remote is already over the top, I found that in most cases, a lot of those Harmonies were very, very effective if you know how to program them properly. And in 99% of the time, they worked just as well. So.
I found that Harmony remotes myself, they're my favorite because they're actually much easier to program, in my experience, than URC or the other remotes, which require a computer program, and you hook it up to your computer and you have to program the macros and so on. With the Harmony, it's so much nicer to be able to say, here's a list of equipment I've got, here's what they do. In other words, when I watch TV, I control the volume on my AV receiver and I change the channel on my satellite box. And then when I'm watching a movie, the source is my Blu-ray player, and I change tracks on that, and I change the volume on the AV receiver, and that's all done online. And then the website downloads all the appropriate macros to the remote. So I found that to be quite a bit easier to use than the URC. But of course, if you're used to it and you've done it many times, it really isn't any problem for an installer such as yourself.
Well, that's right. Now, the big difference there is in the power of the remote and what you can do with it. You know, you mentioned, of course, and I happen to like that about the Harmony remotes as well. The fact that they are very, very intuitive to programming, and the basic setup is very good. And there's actually quite a bit of sophistication in that software, where if you kind of know how to do it, there's some awfully fancy tricks that you can do with the Harmony remote. The platforms for something like a URC remote or an RTI remote are a little bit more powerful. They give you a little bit more flexibility, and there are times when it's helpful to have that. The training, and I've trained for both URC and RTI remotes to be able to program them, it does require a learning curve to get up there, and it's not nearly as intuitive and easy as Harmony, and certainly for the do-it-yourselfer, those brands are not usually readily available. Maybe URC to some extent, but
right. But yeah, as you say, you've been through the training. These companies offer training to installers and dealers and so on, and so they do make it as easy as possible for them to then offer those products and make them work well. And as you say, I do agree with you that some of those remotes do have a greater amount of flexibility and power to do certain things that you might want to do under certain circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, exactly. Have you ever done anything with iPad universal remote or iPhone? You know, that's now an up and coming thing.
Well, it's almost an explosion. They were just barely coming into vogue and becoming available for a lot of the products that I was selling, or some of the products that I was selling, as I sort of segued out and into my new position. I think that what you're talking about there is one of the very, very big trends in the industry that we're going to be talking about a lot in the pages of the magazine going forward. I think that revolution that we're seeing now, where virtually every device that's coming out of any sophistication has got some kind of a remote app, either for iPad, iPhone, or in some cases Android is now sort of on a roll as well.
Right.
Those things have a tremendous opportunity to really address this ease of use issue that I was referring to a minute ago. So I'm really, really pumped up about the developments in that area. The iPad is something that gave the custom install community great trepidation when it first came about.
Oh, yeah?
Well, yeah, you know, you have the sophistication and the control that I've been talking about, that ease of use. A lot of that is GUI-based. It's graphic user interface on some kind of a touchscreen panel, typically. That's where you really, truly get your ease of use. And you know, we had our listener before talking about the $30 remote control. And when I talk about a $300 remote control from Harmony, I'm talking about a touchscreen model that really creates a great deal of ease of use, in part because the buttons change as you need them to change, and makes life a lot easier for the user.
Now, I do understand that point, but I just want to interject here that the problem I have with touchscreen remotes, such as the $300 Harmony, it's the 1100, I believe, or something like an iPad or an iPhone, is you don't have physical buttons, tactile buttons. You have to take your eyes off the screen to look at this relatively bright thing to figure out what you want to do. Don't you find that to be a problem?
Well, you're right about that. And in fact, the best remotes actually have a mix of hard buttons that for the most commonly used functions, and then touchscreen buttons and virtual buttons for the things that you need to dig in more deeply for. So having the right combination of things. My favorite Harmony remote actually is either the 9 or the Harmony 1, which is essentially the same, the 900 rather, which is essentially the same remote, the 900 being the RF version that doesn't require line of sight. But that particular remote, for example, has a great deal of hard buttons on it. It's a wand-style remote that happens to have a touchscreen window on it. And I think that is a very fair thing to say. A lot of people find it very inconvenient, and particularly in a dark room, you don't necessarily want that sort of jarring lighting up of a giant screen in front of you. You know, we were talking about the iPad before, and maybe to some extent that is one of the limitations or potential limitations of the iPad as a remote control, and even the iPhone, because you don't have those hard buttons to work with. But the ability to intuitively navigate all of the important functions, or at least the ones that you as a user feel are important, is really an amazing thing, and that's where I think we're going to see a revolution.
Reverb Mike in the chat room asks if you know of any good remote apps for the iPad 2 specifically.
Oh, you know what? No, not at the moment. I have not personally tried one that is specifically dedicated for being universal remote. There's one out right now, and I'm drawing a blank on the name for it. I know that we covered it in our publication just a couple of months back. But I'd like to do an extensive survey of the universal remote programs and see what really works best. Most of the apps that are out there right now are not really designed necessarily for using across a variety of different components, but in fact are dedicated to individual or specific products. And that's, those tend to be product centric, of course. So.
Or manufacturer centric, at least.
Well, at the very least, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But we're seeing it. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
I was just going to say we're seeing more and more of them. I saw the new Denon receivers this year, and they have their app all ready to go for that product as well. So, and it's I think we're going to start to see them with especially a lot of the sophisticated types of receiver products. So.
You were speaking that a bit earlier that you wanted to do a big piece in the magazine about remotes and universal remotes. I think that's a great idea. What else have you got planned for the magazine and the website? What are your thoughts about what kind of coverage and how you're going to approach the whole area of home theater, both online and in print, going forward?
Well, that's a pretty wide open question. There's a lot of, and I'm thinking about it, believe me. There's a lot of...
Well, I'm sure you are.
Yeah, there are a number of things that I think there's 2 or 3 questions there in all of that. First of all, what are the trends right now? Where do I see a lot of the coverage being devoted to? We have a number of things right now that if not really issues that are facing the home theater enthusiast, certainly trends and things that are really at top of mind. We've got 3D, and it's really the question of 3D or not 3D these days, and whether or not, it really is meaningful to you. And people are passionate about that. We get mail from readers who basically say, why are you wasting our time with this? We do every television review now. We have a section on 2D performance and 3D performance. And the nature of that, of course, is that the sets are, in fact, the ones that we're reviewing are the top of the line TVs, and certainly they have the 3D functionality, and we're going to report on it. But this is
what I've always said in terms of coverage. People ask me the same question: why are you spending so much time covering 3D? And I say, well, because there's a lot to cover. Love it or hate it. Now I believe certainly more than 50% of Sony TVs, and probably more than 50% of many other manufacturers' TVs have 3D capability. And when we review those TVs, we really need to cover that and see how well it works.
Oh, we do, and it's trickling down more and more. Certainly, the product lines this year, we're seeing it much lower in the product line and across a broader range of SKUs. But one of the issues there that we're also facing is this whole question of passive versus active 3D.
A huge question, yes.
It really is, and what we're finding is that manufacturers are starting to fall on one side or the other, and at the moment you've got Vizio and LG and Toshiba actually who are shepherding a new passive 3D system into homes, and everybody else is still doing active, and there's a real question about what consumers want, really. And then within that subset, we as the enthusiasts have to decide what we want. So, for example, right now we just finished reviewing the first Vizio TV, the first TV that has passive 3D technology. That's a Vizio set that hit the market a little while ago, and we're looking at the moment at the new LG television, and we're trying to get some sense of whether this is better or worse than the active technology. So the question of 3D and what's its use, what's its longevity, and how good or bad is it, is something that we're going to continue to cover in the magazine, certainly from a product standpoint, and maybe from a feature standpoint. I think streaming content. There's a revolution in that right now, and for us enthusiasts, I'm very concerned about this sort of rush to mediocrity that we run the risk of doing here, with everybody jumping on the streaming bandwagon before really the pipeline is big enough to allow us to have the kind of quality and if not quantity of movies that we want. So we don't want to see any sort of premature death of Blu-ray or any of the physical media until we know that we've got our precious pixels and bits in just the right places. So
true enough. However, I maintain, and I always have, that there is a place for streaming and for Blu-ray. I do not believe that Blu-ray is going to go away, much as some people say. They say, Blu-ray is the last physical format, it's going to disappear, and we're only going to have streaming. I really don't think that's true, and the reason I don't think it's true is we don't yet have the commonly available bandwidth to allow the same quality as Blu-ray to come streaming down the pipe. On the other hand, that is a far more convenient way, in many cases, to get content. So there's a trade-off there, and I think there's a place for both, really, in the modern home theater.
Well, I would absolutely agree with you, Scott. I think that the big concern is that the manufacturers have a tendency to create products, and the content providers have a tendency to gravitate to those places where they see the volume. And my fear is always that and Blu-ray, theoretically we should always have that as our archival sort of format there, but
the reference standard.
Oh, absolutely. And there's no question, it's funny, people don't realize just how much better Blu-ray really is than even standard, high definition broadcasts that are coming across their cable box or the satellite these days. Even FiOS, it's really a step above, and let's not even talk about the sound quality. So, I don't want to see it go away, but my fear, and I think the fear of some of our readers, is that with everybody sort of pushing hard and making those streaming options more and more readily available, I had the very interesting experience last month of having two things happen within a couple of days of each other that was just sort of a little bit profound for me. The first thing was that I had a nice opportunity to go see in a theater a digital screening of the brand new, recently restored film of Taxi Driver, which was...
I heard about that. Mm-hmm.
Yes, the seminal 1976 or 77, Scorsese film with De Niro. Right. And the restoration was just so stunning. It was so beautiful that the thought of watching that on any kind of a streaming format versus the Blu-ray that just came out was just ridiculous. You'd never even consider it. A day or two later, I happened to go over to my local Blockbuster because I was one of those people who continued to frequent my local store. I liked going to the Blockbuster. I liked picking up whatever Blu-rays I wanted and being able to browse. And it was closed, basically. The signs were up and they were just selling out the inventory. It was one of those 600 or so stores that got shuttered in this recent acquisition. Right. And, it really drove home for me how things have changed. And many of the custom install customers that I had, who I would not consider to be videophiles in any way and enthusiasts, were all on Netflix. They were all starting to use Pandora once I had exposed them to it. A lot of the time I would be the first person who brought something in. They had been, this is the kind of, a lot of families had been getting their Netflix over their Wii console, and we're happy now to have it in a Blu-ray player that could preserve the quality a little bit better. And then they were also being exposed for the first time to things like internet radio and some of the other services that are out there, as well as some of the higher quality services like Vudu. And they took to it. I could see that even non-enthusiasts, not geeky people, were very enthused by this idea of not having to go anywhere and having the video store in their home. So
having the video store in your home, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
So so those sorts of things just make me worry about how quickly we're going to be able, how easily it's going to be to get discs, and how quickly they might potentially go away. So we'll cover that too going forward. Yes,
absolutely. Speaking of which, I must take a moment here. How appropriate could it be, really, to take a moment to thank the sponsor for this episode, none other than Netflix.com.
And there you go.
It lets you watch thousands of TV episodes and movies streamed to your PC or Mac or TV directly. And as we've been talking, there are a lot of TVs and now Blu-ray players that have the ability to acquire Netflix directly. See, what I really like about Netflix is that we were talking before about having the choice. You can you either might want the ultimate quality of Blu-ray, or which you can get from Netflix in one business day by mail, or you can get it streaming instantly at perhaps slightly lower quality, but the convenience is there to stream it directly. And interestingly, you can get a free 30-day trial now at Netflix going to netflix.com/twit. You can get these movies directly to your home, saves time, money, hassle. We were talking before, it becomes the video store in your home. You don't have to go out and do anything or go anywhere. And you can watch thousands of TV episodes and movies streamed directly to your home theater system, including your Xbox 360, PS3, or Nintendo Wii, as you were mentioning before.
Yeah.
So it really does offer you the best of both worlds, really. Depending on whether you want quality or convenience, you have them both, really, with Netflix.
It's a great service.
It really is, and it's available on. What's nice is that it's available on most platforms. You can't get everything on your Sony TV or on your Samsung TV or on your Vizio TV. They all have partnerships, but most of them have partnerships with Netflix. So that really does make it fairly ubiquitous. I do want to mention one quick Netflix streaming pick of the week, because I was looking around on Netflix to see what were their latest additions. And the one that really got me was Futurama, Into the Wild Green Yonder. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
It's great. Have you seen Futurama, the TV show?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Oh, okay. It's done by, it was created by Matt Groening, the same guy who did The Simpsons.
Oh, gotcha,
and
yeah.
It's a great animated series. It didn't last very long. It only lasted a few seasons. But in addition to the half-hour episodes, they did several full movie-length pieces. One of them is Into the Wild Green Yonder, kind of a send-up of the whole green movement and environmental concerns and so on. It stars Billy West and Katie Sagal, the woman who was the wife on Married with Children. And she does a great voice on that show. And so I really do recommend that. It is on Blu-ray, but here's the thing. Particularly with animation, it probably doesn't make as much difference because it's animated, and there's a lot of very solid colors. It's not a lot of serious detail. So I haven't seen the stream yet. I intend to go take a look at it. When I saw it today as I was looking around, I went, oh, yeah, I got to check that out because I'll bet you it looks pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So you can instantly watch this movie or choose from thousands of TV episodes and other movies when you register for a free trial membership. Go to netflix.com/twit. Be sure to sign up for your free trial at netflix.com/twit. So the other thing that's going on in the chat room here, as it always does whenever we talk about 3D, is 3D, who cares? What about 4K?
Ah, yeah.
That's what we really want. And it seems to me that that's pretty universal. 3D is a big controversy, right? Some people love it. Some people hate it. Some people don't care one way or the other. It's here to stay, I think. I don't think it's going to leave as it did before. It's just going to become a feature of these TVs and Blu-ray players, just like streaming is. But 4K, everybody wants.
Well, absolutely. And what you're really talking about there, and, we were talking about, what kinds of things are we going to see in the magazine. Ultimately, something like streaming and 3D, these are part-time features. When I think what's really of interest to the readers is the core picture and sound quality and what we can do to improve that. How do we improve our systems? And ultimately, what are the new trends in gear that are going to get us closer to that? And, I'm very, very excited about higher resolution formats. I'd like to see if we can get some real content that can, really show it off.
This is the problem. We have 3D content, not very much yet, but it is growing. But how do we get 4K content into the home? We have it in the movie theater now. We have the Sony 4K digital projector in which we can actually go to the movies, some theaters, and see actual 4K content. Yep. But we can't at home yet. And even if we had 4K displays, we don't have any way to deliver real 4K content. We don't have a disc format for physical media. We don't have any way really to stream 4K, much less high def. We do have a little bit of that, but it's going to be a while till we actually see 4K in the home, don't you think?
Well, absolutely, and primarily for the reason that you say, it would not shock or surprise me to see if they could start really driving down the cost of 4K projection. We see it now, and it's primarily a digital cinema phenomena, but I can't see any reason why they won't be able to get that down to an affordable price over a period of time. But that delivery mechanism that you talk about, Scott, is really, that's an issue. I don't know how you get that stuff in. On the other hand, I've seen some pretty good upscaling of 2K to things like 4K and beyond. And if the scaling is done well, you can take full advantage of all the detail that's in the projection display and still get a fantastic experience. Putting all of that aside, though, and I know you've had a chance to look at some of the very late generation projectors, even some of the budget projectors. They really are stunning, and
no doubt.
It's almost hard unless you have a very, very large screen. And I've been in my custom install business. I've seen some awfully big theaters for home theaters, but for the typical home theater, it's hard to imagine it getting much better if you have a good, more or less state-of-the-art type projector. Which doesn't necessarily mean expensive either.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And it reminds me, last week I was at the NAB show, National Association of Broadcasters, with Leo Laporte and Team Twit. And we saw a number of 4K displays there. And the one that struck me the most was in the JVC booth. They were showing footage that they had shot on their 4K camera on a 4K flat panel. It was actually from IBM that measured something like 20 inches. It was tiny. And it's like, what's the point? Well, the point is I could get up to it and put my eyeball almost touching the screen, and I still couldn't see the pixels.
Well, that's right. I mean, that's like a pinpoint, and but when you get up to the bigger screen sizes, that obviously is the advantage of that. And
absolutely,
yeah. No, I'm looking forward to it. I think we're going to see them eventually. So that, and I think I'd like to think that we'll continue to get better and better sound quality as well. Although at this point in time, you've got essentially straight PCM and lossless formats, and it was a big step up, obviously, from Dolby Digital to those formats, and it's actually you can really hear the difference. So
sure. My friend SoCal Ray Jr. in the chat room asks, what are your thoughts on audio and video calibration? I know that you're an ISF video calibrator, trained calibrator.
Sure. Well, a couple interesting thoughts about that. The first thing is that you got to calibrate your TV, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to call on a professional calibrator, but at the very, very least, I think certainly anyone who fancies themselves an enthusiast, and honestly, really any consumer will benefit from just properly putting a TV into its appropriate presets. The things that you gain when you do a professional calibration, things like the grayscale, being able to get that grayscale perfectly even, and knowing that you've got perfect color balance, knowing that your primaries have been adjusted to where you've got just the right color space. And then the amount of time that you spend both using test patterns and using your eyes to tune contrast, black level, peak whites, and gamma, all those things that we do, it really can make a tremendous difference, and it can make a even bigger difference on a projection screen. So I wouldn't dismiss it. I would say that at the very, very least, everybody needs to at least get their television into the cinema mode, or get their TV into whatever the best mode in the set is. It's usually that cinema or movie mode, and then
cinema or movie, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then do a little bit of tuning and tweaking. That's a little dark for some people. You can always punch it up a little bit. But if you start there, on a lot of the newer TVs, we have found that they are very, very close to accurate. Not perfect by any means, and some of them are more off than others. But if you don't feel the need to bring in a professional calibrator and spend that kind of money on a flat panel, then you can certainly at least start to get it close. Now,
you get
audio,
it closer. Exactly right.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? If you have a good eye, you can tell when a television's grayscale is too blue, or the color temperature is too blue. You can see it. There's not too much you can do without the special instruments, but it is a very, very important thing, and it's what makes video look more film-like, and
and more natural, more like you're looking out a window.
Exactly. And, even just knowing enough to turn off the interpolation modes, and that's another controversial area.
Yes.
Some people love it and some people don't. But if you want, if you want to honor the artistic intent of a film that you're watching, you really don't want it to look like a soap opera. So
this is a very good point. You're going to talk about audio in just a second, but I have to respond. I just have to jump in here about the interpolation mode and make sure everyone understands that on an LCD TV, you're now seeing LCD TVs with a specification that says 120 hertz or 240 hertz. And what that means is that they are displaying each frame of the video signal several times. And one thing that they can do, these TVs, is they can actually create a new frame in between the existing frames, and what that really does is it makes the motion sharper. So if there's an object in motion, car driving down the street or a football flying through the air or whatever, it looks sharper when you turn that interpolation on. However, it introduces a problem, an artifact called the soap opera effect. It makes it look like it was shot on video or like it was shot on a soap opera stage. Most videophiles really object to this very much. And Rob, you're exactly right that it is not what the director intended. I personally, I don't mind it. I'm able to look past that soap opera effect and enjoy the sharper motion. But I realize I'm seriously in the minority on this.
Well, and that's the thing. It really is a matter of personal taste. And, there is an almost hyper-realism that you see to the picture when these modes are turned on. And, it's almost fascinating because it brings objects and people into such relief that you can almost tell, you can look at something and almost know and understand and see. It's almost like you can see the lighting coming in from off the frame. That's how it I don't want to say exaggerates the highlights in those images, but it actually creates a sense of things almost jumping off the screen, not to use that 3D analogy, but
even in non-3D TVs, yeah.
Right, and gives it a sharp, almost realistic edge. So it's people. It's just a matter of taste and what you like. So
ultimately, it is. Got a couple questions in the chat room here about Mitsubishi. What do we think about Mitsubishi DLP rear projection TVs? The only rear projection TV left on the market.
They are. They're the only ones left. So, you know, the thing about rear projection sets, and I've always been a big fan of rear projection DLP. I was really, because it's in terms of bang for the buck, to get the largest screen size you want, you still can't get up into those, even with a flat panel, you still can't get up into those really big screen sizes. You either have to go with a front projector or you have to have a rear projector to make it happen. And
that's
those
right.
sets
Mitsubishi's up to 92 inches now.
Yep, isn't that incredible? Now, to me, you know, the reason to do that would be you just simply can't control the light in your room, and you have to be able to do that when you have a front projector, because at that point you're really in front. If you're making the room for a set that big, you know, you've got to have a good reason to want to do a rear projector instead of a front projector these days. But cost, of course, is one of those issues. And then the other one is the ability to control the light. But you know, they make a terrific TV. They have pretty much gotten out of every other aspect of the business now. They announced recently that they were not going to compete anymore in the LCD market.
That's right.
Yep. So this is their specialty. And you know, the difference between a flat panel and a rear projector is that there's always the potential. And I say this reservedly. There's always the potential to get a sharper image on a direct view set. And because with a projection, you are in fact going through some optical elements, and you're using a mirror, and you're having all those possibilities of not having things be as perfectly crisp as you'd like. But if you look at the current generation of MITS projectors, they're really, really good. And if having something that hangs on the wall is not the most important thing in the world to you, it's an excellent option if you want a really big screen size at a really good price.
At a really good price, exactly. Yeah. A couple of people in the Jim in the chat room is asking if a 19-inch Vizio HD TV can be calibrated. I think the answer is yes, but boy, a 19-incher. I mean, you wouldn't want to spend $300 or $400 having that professionally calibrated, would you?
No, you wouldn't. And in fact, what really does happen is that if you do look at some of those smaller TVs, and although we don't look at them for the magazine, I had the opportunity to play with plenty of them in my install business.
Sure, like in the kitchen or even the bathroom in some cases.
Kitchens, bathrooms, you know, sometimes a bedroom, although bedroom TVs can be an awful lot bigger than that, and
sure,
you know, some of those other secondary areas. But the thing is, you do, for the most part, end up with very limited controls over the video picture in smaller televisions. And I don't think it's anticipated that they're going to be used by a serious enthusiast or anyone who's going to bother with that. There usually are modes. There are different preset modes in those sets, and selecting the right one is going to get you at least a better picture on that. But the kinds of controls that we typically need, either in a user menu, or you'd have to presumably get into, on a TV like that, you probably have to get into the service menus to be able to calibrate it. I'm not sure it would be worth the effort with that size.
I kind of don't think so. Raiden in the chat room asks, would like to know about all the different HD TVs and the various large screen sizes. Why do we still have letterbox and not full screen?
Oh, well, that's a really good question.
It is a really good question.
Yeah. You know, most of the movies, of course, that get shot in film for the theaters are, in fact, not the precise aspect ratio of what is the HD TV standard of 16:9. You know, they are wider films, and consequently, when you transfer them to any kind of a 16:9 widescreen, you're going to end up with those black bars. Now, to get around that, for example, Vizio is preparing to release later this year some widescreen televisions.
Yeah, we saw those at CES, I think. We saw them at CES 2010, and then they kind of retreated from that, and now they're maybe coming back into it. So
they're working on it. They're working on it. That's my latest information. And you know,
you will certainly get one in for review. We will as soon as possible, right?
Absolutely. No, the minute that it's available, we're going to be all over it. I think it's a great format. You know, as Vizio explained to me, and I had a chance to meet with one of their representatives recently, they're very excited because they see it as not only a way to help eliminate those bars and give you that sort of perfect cinematic experience when you're watching movies, but when you're watching regular 16 by 9 high def, you're left with a space to the right or the left of
or
the
both.
image.
I mean, basically, you have window box bars. You have black bars on the sides.
Right, but one of the options that they anticipate is the ability to push that thing far right or far left and be able to use the space on the right for various types of internet-connected information, streaming activities, widgets, whatever. So all of a sudden, you're going to have. Isn't that a fascinating idea to be able to watch a standard 16 by 9 high def image? I say standard. Watch a 16 by 9 high def image, and then all of a sudden, all these other features that now typically have to be overlaid with the picture get their own little space on the side. Now, whether or not you want to watch TV that way is another question.
I personally don't. But I'm kind of old school in that regard. And it does bring up an interesting point that I had thought of earlier that I wanted to just bring up regarding iPads. And we were talking about iPads being universal controllers. But I also at NAB heard quite a few people talking about what they called the multi-screen experience. So you've got your main program on your TV, and then on your iPad or iPhone, you've got secondary information that you can grab, the bio of the actor or what else the director has done or whatever. And what you're saying here about this new Vizio wide screen TV, it's actually the ratio is 21 by 9, I believe. You could put some of that information up on the side of the screen without intruding on the main picture.
That's right. And there's a place for it. I don't think you necessarily want to watch a movie and have anything else going on at that time. But sports events, it's a great opportunity to be able to track either other games or various aspects of the game you're watching via some kind of an RSS feed or some kind of an internet connection there, and have it right there while you're watching the game and not missing even one pixel of it. So
no, that's a great idea.
Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, before we run out of time, I did want to talk a little audio with you since we've spent most of the time here talking about video, which is great. Ray asked earlier about audio calibration, and I think you might have had something to say about that. So I didn't want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So I think that one of the things, and there's nothing new about this. There's nothing earth-shattering. There's nothing trend-setting about it. But ultimately, I think home theater enthusiasts continue to face the same obstacles and impediments to getting great sound that they always have. And a lot of it has to do with the room and the environment and having the equipment properly set up. And certainly I'm excited by some of the new and continually evolving algorithms that are being used for room correction and room setup. But I think that one of the themes going forward that I'm going to be looking to do more features on and just provide more information on is how do you really extract the best sound, and whether that is calibrating your system properly and perhaps equalizing it using one of these room setup systems like Odyssey, or for that matter, really treating your room and understanding and knowing what kinds of things to put in your room to help create an acoustic space that gives you the best shot at great sound and articulate dialogue.
I think this is a very important point that is often given short shrift, shall we say. And I look forward to your coverage of that particular subject, as well as the other ones you've talked about, because I think it's great if people get a sense of making their room essentially another component in their system and optimizing it just as they would their receiver or whatever.
Well, it's absolutely true, and most people don't realize that the room that you're in may have the most significant effect of any component that you have. You cannot fix a bad room with better components, and you can often extract more from lesser equipment if you've got a good room.
Good point.
and getting the right mix of reflective, absorptive and diffusive materials in the right places, and then of course dealing with the bass, which is another huge challenge, and actually one of that is a very great interest to the readers. In getting into this position, I went through all the reader mail and so many questions about subwoofers and setting up subs and which sub is the best, and everybody
and where to
wants
place it.
just get. Well, that's it, and getting the best bass is probably the biggest challenge that almost everybody faces, because it's so very room dependent, and I think we need to do more coverage of that, and also cover a lot more subs as standalone review products, because there's great interest in the category.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's the question of how many speakers do you need? We've gone from 5.1 now to 7.1. DTS is talking about 11.1. Where will it stop?
Really? Yeah, the jury is still out on just how many you really need, and I'll tell you what, it goes all ways. I had the interesting experience of talking with the chief technologist at SRS just a couple of days ago.
Alan Kramer. He's been a guest on my podcast here.
Yep, and what a brilliant guy, and such a fascinating job that he has, because really, so much of it has to do with the science of hearing and what do we know and what are we not doing properly right now. And I had the experience of going to the SRS facility a little while ago and hearing a demo of some technology, some 3D technology. Cinema 3D technology that they're going to be coming out with soon. You'll start to see it in products probably next year. It was some of the best surround sound that I've ever heard, and they were able to produce it with 2 speakers, and just completely blew me away. And it honestly threw into relief for me this question of how many speakers do we really need if we just know a lot about how people hear and can manipulate the sound in ways that gives us a convincing surround field. So I think that's a question that we're going to delve into more and more, but I would very much like to test some of these systems and see what really happens when you do 11 speakers, I
mean, the SRS demo is remarkable in that it really does give you, in many ways, better surround sound from 2 speakers than an actual 5.1 or 7.1 surround sound system.
Yeah, and I have to emphasize, we're not talking now about the kind of stuff that you see today from SRS that's in televisions, which does a decent job of kind of expanding the sound field a little bit. This is some brand new cutting edge stuff that we're going to write a little bit about in the magazine going forward, and it's the kind of thing where they are hoping to really revolutionize not only the way we listen in the home, but the way that film and other video content is in fact made. And that's going to be a very interesting development going forward. Very impressive stuff.
It really is. It really is. The other point I would make is one thing that I was impressed about with the SRS demo was it actually made things sound like they were above you and below you to some extent, which brings up the whole issue of a lot of people call 5.1 and 7.1 surround sound. They call that 3D audio, and I never have, because it's really still in a plane, a 2-dimensional plane. And in order to get to call it real 3D, which would be appropriate to go along with all this 3D content that is now here and coming, is to have something actually, speakers over your head or some sort of algorithm that makes it seem like sounds are actually overhead or down below. And so I'm really very interested in following the SRS technology for that reason as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've got a ways to go, but it's going to be interesting to see what they're able to pull off. And one of the things about that SRS system is that if you do add more speakers to it, they suggest you'll in essence get more resolution and more an enhanced experience. But what I heard with 2 speakers was very impressive.
Yeah, quite remarkable. Well, it seems impossible, but we've come to the end of a very interesting hour. I want to thank you, Rob Sabin, new editor of Home Theater Magazine, for joining me on today's podcast.
Well, thank you very, very much. It's been a lot of fun, Scott, and I look forward to doing it again. I know that both of us share the same passion for all of the equipment and the interesting developments in the industry, so maybe we'll have a chance to talk about some of these things again going forward.
You bet. You bet. I look forward to having you on as a guest again. Thanks so much. Of course, you can read Rob's stuff at hometheater.com, which is one of my online homes as well, in addition to ultimateavmag.com. You can email me at scott@twit.tv, and you can follow me on Twitter at htgeekscott. Next week, I have 2 guest geeks scheduled. David Cole and DJ Roller of Next 3D, developers of a fascinating new streaming 3D technology, which I saw at NAB, and I'm really looking forward to talking with them on the show and bringing you some information about this fascinating technology. So I sure hope you'll join me. Until then, geek out.